Imagine this. The gods who drew crowds to marble temples were crueler than any tyrant. They toppled cities over a bruised pride, hunted girls for refusing love, chained a friend to a rock for bringing us fire. Lightning became a verdict, storms a sentence. And the strangest part? We turned these agonies into lullabies, passing them down as bedtime tales wrapped in gold leaf and marble glow. Tonight, in a quiet American bedroom, a nightlight hums. A parent smooths a glossy page and whispers familiar names: Zeus, Hades, Hera, as if they were gentle neighbors and not the weather of fear. We sip our tea, we smile at winged sandals, and we forget that these stories were once survival manuals written by people bargaining with the sky. We forget how easily power calls itself sacred, and how suffering is dressed as destiny when a god points and says, "Thus, stay with me." In the next hour, we'll look straight at the worst thing in Greek myth. And it isn't a monster, it's an idea. That pain can be justified by order. That obedience earns protection. That hope itself was once locked away and rationed. We'll walk from the marketplace to the oracle, from the shoreline to the cliff path, and you will hear the quiet sentence hidden inside every thunderclap. You will see why these tales say more about us than about any immortal. Our fears, our bargains, our need to believe that someone is steering the storm. But for now, let the pace soften. Set your phone face down. Inhale, and slowly exhale. Close your eyes and step onto a narrow stone bridge of time. Under your home, beneath concrete and wires, the earth still keeps shards of amphorae, the ash of a votive fire, a coin stamped with an owl's watchful gaze. The same moon at your window tonight once silvered the Aegean and watched ships depart for a war sparked by an apple of vanity. Feel that moonlight, thin and cool, drift across your pillow. Gently now. The air warms, olive sweet, dust soft. Somewhere, a bronze bell wavers. Sandals whisper across a sun-bleached road. Far off, a chorus warms their voices, and a priest lifts a lamp. The room around you grows quieter, dimmer, kinder. Let the day loosen its grip. Let the noise drain away. We are going back, calmly, carefully, to the beginning. Into a world that felt the gods breathing on their necks. Breathe in, breathe out, and come with me. Slow your breath. The room you're in loosens at the edges, like a watercolor fading back into paper. The hum of appliances grows distant, then still. What lingers is a low, resinous sweetness. Imagine the scent of torch pitch warming in a quiet temple, its smoke curling upward in thin blue threads. There is incense too, gentle and powdery, holding the ghost of frankincense and myrrh. Beneath it all breathes the sea, a clean salt tang, sun-dried nets, kelp left on stone. Inhale, and there it is again. The shoreline in the air, the patient, briny promise that tomorrow's light will come in on a tide. Listen, a different city wakes around you. It is Athens in full afternoon, and the agora murmurs like a great beehive, yet each sound is distinct. Sandaled feet flick grit on the paving. A vendor laughs, a donkey snorts. Boys chase each other past a stall piled with figs. Someone taps the shoulder of an amphora with a ring, and the ceramic sings a quick, hollow note. Farther off, voices gather into chant. Priests test the first syllables the way musicians tune strings, soft and low, until the phrases align and the air vibrates with a measured ancient cadence. Their words are not a command. They are a rhythm, a way of calling time to heal. Under your hands, a railing cools the pulse in your palms. It is marble, veined with faint clouds. Step. Your bare feet meet the first stair, and the stone holds the day's chill. Step again. Another breath of coolness, a light grit, a feeling like touching a riverbed where the current has polished everything to silk. Keep your pace unhurried. Let the soles of your feet notice each plane, the tiny dips where others have walked. Sunshine warms your shoulders, and the contrast is delicious. Cool beneath, golden above, the body drawn gently between shade and light, like a lyre string sounding a clean note. Inside the portico, the shadows are alive with small, flickering suns. Oil lamps tremble, not from a draft, but from the life of flame itself, breathing, shrinking, blooming. Each tremor writes soft gold across a column and sets a low relief carving in motion. A boar lifts from the stone. A laurel leaf glitters at its edge. A hero's profile leans toward you, then recedes. The light isn't sharp. It glows like a promise kept. Even when your eyes close, you can still feel it stroking the lids, warm as a hand that means no harm. Beyond the portico, day moves toward evening. The Parthenon holds the sky like a bowl. As the sun slips, the marble catches a blush, apricot, then rose, then pale bone, before quiet moonlight lays itself down in sheets. The night here is not dark. It is silver. The Acropolis becomes a ship with sails of stone, and the city below rustles like a calm sea. Somewhere on a rooftop, an old woman turns olives with a wooden spoon. The spoon knocks gently against the lip of a jar. Talk, talk, an honest sound, certain and ordinary. In the street, a boy balances a tray of little clay lamps. They ring softly as they touch, a chorus of ceramic bells. Smell again the mixed world, resin and smoke, pressed olives, wool washed in river water, bread baked on hot walls, a sour sweet puff from fermenting grapes. These are not separate notes. They braid into a single, generous ribbon that loops around you, holds you steady, tells your body without words that it has arrived somewhere that knows how to care for time. You are not alone. A young traveler steps into the square, a bundle at his shoulder, a sprig of fresh laurel stuck into his belt for luck. He is no hero in bronze. He is the kind of person you might sit next to on a bus, quiet and decent and thinking of his mother. Tonight, he will sleep on clean straw under an eave and dream of a road that climbs into blue mountains. In the morning, he will begin to walk that road because he has a question. He believes there is a place where questions receive answers, not from people, but from the earth speaking through a god. You watch him from a little distance, the way you sometimes watch your own thoughts pass. His steps are patient. He pauses to drink from a public fountain. The water is cold and tastes faintly of stone. He ties his sandal with a neat, practical knot. He does not hurry through the market. He listens to a flute player, buys a fig, thanks the seller with a nod. The city's noise does not cling to him. It sifts away, leaving him clear. Now the bridge begins. Your pillow, your sheets. Feel how they turn to straw under your shoulder blades, clean and crisp, with the warm hay smell of late summer. Overhead, no ceiling, only a thatch, and beyond it, stars that seem closer, because no glass is between you and their light. A dog sighs somewhere outside. An old door finds its groove, wood on wood, and settles. You are at the seam, one world loosening, another drawing near. Breathe in, the resin, the sea. Breathe out, the last of the day. Dawn. Not sudden, but like milk poured into dark coffee. The traveler rises with the birds. Their songs are simple, 3 notes, a pause, 3 notes again, enough to tip the scale toward morning. The road to Delphi lifts away from the fields and slips into olive groves. The trunks twist like dancers paused mid-turn. The leaves make a sound like rain, although the sky is clear. Dew touches your ankles. Dust softens the path. With each step, the air cools. Somewhere above, a goat bell answers another goat bell, and then the hill keeps their secret. As the path climbs, scents change. The sea falls behind. Pine and thyme step forward. Crush a sprig of thyme between finger and thumb. The green releases its sharp, waking perfume. Resin beads on wounded bark. When the wind moves, the grove becomes an instrument. Branches rub. Needles sing. The whole slope whispers. The traveler breathes deeper, and so do you. Body and thought begin to match the rhythm of the land. Long inhale up the grade. Soft exhale where the path levels. Light filters differently here. It does not dazzle. It diffuses, broken by leaves, into coins that glide over your hands and the traveler's shoulder, then slide away. Above the trees, the mountains open. Pale shoulders under a sky so clear it looks freshly washed. The stones along the path shine with mica. When shoes scuff them, they flash. Even the shadows are gentle. Blue, cool, edged with light like feathers. By the time the first terraces of Delphi appear, the day has become a wide, quiet room. Steps fan upward. Columns lift, pale and calm. Somewhere inside the sanctuary, a small flame waits in a bronze tripod, its warmth breathing into the cool morning. You can already hear the careful hush. A hush that is not silence, but a listening made of many lives pressing their questions into one place. The traveler pauses, places his palm on the stone, and closes his eyes. You do the same. Your modern bed is far away now, and yet closer than ever. Here, too, you are simply a person about to ask for kindness from the world. Let your breath match the mountain's slow pulse. Smell the resin, the incense, the thin, clean air. Feel marble cool under fingertips, sun mild on your forearms. Watch the lamp flame tremble and steady. The agora's hum is gone, replaced by a softer current, the sound of leaves, of sandals on steps, of a voice warming to a prayer. You are across the bridge now, safe on the other side, awake within a dream of the past. And somewhere in that dream, the god is already listening. Breathe in, softly. This is one person's thread, woven through the broader tapestry. His name is Nicandros, though his mother calls him Nico when the day has been kind. He comes from a small cove where the water folds and unfolds like a sleeping creature's chest. The houses there are whitewashed and low, with nets hung like laundry, and a fig tree that gives shade to the bench where the old men fix floats and tell the same 3 jokes, each time as if new. Nico's hands are a fisherman's hands, nicked by shells, salted by habit, strong in ways that look ordinary until they lift a wet rope heavy with the sea's decision. He is young, but his back already knows the tilt of a boat and the rhythm of a swell. Most mornings he wakes before color returns to the world, when everything is a careful gray. He takes a wedge of bread, a strip of goat cheese, and a quiet blessing from his mother's eyes. Sometimes he touches the doorframe as he leaves. Old wood, worn smooth by other hands, doing the same small ritual. He does this not because he believes the wood is a god, but because at that hour he wants the day to begin with something honest under his fingertips. There was a winter not long ago when the sea kept what it took. They had watched the cloud bank crawl in, a low animal with a wet growl, and by the time Nico and his friend Petros turned for home, The sky had already made up its mind. What Nico remembers most is not the wave, not the cold slam, or the taste of iron in his mouth. He remembers Petros, grinning for courage, shouting something about a feast waiting for them if they beat the storm, and how the grin stayed on Petros's face even when the boat pitched so hard you could see the bones of the sea under its skin. Then the grin was gone, because Petros was gone. Nico found himself clutching the gunwale, and the name Poseidon jammed against his teeth like a pebble. Later, when the weather had turned blank as chalk and Petros did not come back, the name came out of him as a broken prayer and a broken curse at once. The village said sacrifices must be made. A goat offered to the sea, a promise to the god of the blue dark underworlds of water. Nico brought the goat. He watched the blood pool, red on stone, watched the priest lift his eyes to the horizon and read approval or indifference in its flat line. The next day, the sea was calm. A pale green plate. Was that mercy? Was that just weather? The goat did not answer. Petros did not answer. But the feeling that the world could be bargained with, that feeling we learn as children, offering good behavior in exchange for a safe night, moved back into Nico's chest and made its home. Since then, he has been steady, mostly. He mends, he casts, he prays the words everyone prays when the wind shifts. But there is a place under his ribs that no longer matches the rhythm outside. It is a question mark pressed flat and hidden. It rises at dusk sometimes, when gulls drift like scraps of parchment and the water goes the color of diluted wine. He thinks of a thing his mother once said in the lazy voice she uses when storytelling, that Prometheus was punished for bringing fire, not for malice, but for love. The gods heard him because he helped. Nico did not like that story, even as a boy. Now it sits beside the question that taps from inside. If kindness can be a crime, what sort of sky rules us? He avoids the shrine of Poseidon when he can, circling the long way to the nets. He tells himself it is a matter of convenience, then laughs at himself because the long way is never the convenient way. He is not faithless. He is careful. He lays a fish on the altar sometimes, the smallest of the catch, and waits for a feeling. He wants the word blessed to move through him, but often what he gets is a prickle down the back, as if he has been noticed by something that does not blink. In the evenings, he sits with his mother, who sorts olives into a shallow basket and hums. His sister Kira braids her hair and unbraids it, braids and unbraids, as if practicing the reversals of fate. Kira coughs in winter. Nothing terrible, just a narrow, barked sound. But this last year, the cough was longer, and his mother began to look at him the way a person looks at a wall when deciding where to hang a protective charm. The doctor in the town gave herbs, and Kira laughed and danced on the beach the first day of spring, and the cough seemed folded and put away. That night, Nico dreamed of a fish with eyes like lamps, and woke sure that he would walk to Delphi and ask Apollo for an answer. He did not know what exactly the question would be. It would be shaped like Petros and Kira and a goat and a storm and a god with a trident who, when displeased, churned the floor of the world. So he walked. You were with him in the olive groves just now, remember? He entered the sanctuary at dawn, palms and soles clean from the fountain, a laurel sprig tucked into his belt the way men carry a lucky nail or a ribbon, not because the ribbon itself can stop a wheel from coming off, but because it is good to meet a dangerous day wearing a sign that says, you know what you're doing. At the outer court, He watched the goat chosen for the sign. They sprinkled water on its back, and when the short hairs rippled, it was said the god consented to speak. The goat shivered easily in the morning cool. The priests nodded. Nico did not know if the animal trembled because of God or cold or the small shock of water in a tender place. He thought of Petros laughing at the wave. He thought of Kira coughing. He thought that every creature trembles, and people are very good at turning that into a message. He made his offering, a length of dyed wool, a fish hook hammered out by his grandfather, a pinch of salt from the coast where the wind left it caught in the grass. Nothing rich, nothing a god would want, but everything a human being could bear to give up without unmaking himself. The priest touched each thing, murmured the name of the god, and Nico felt, if not seen, a door open beside him. Not a real door, but that sudden sensation that you have been allowed forward in a line you don't remember joining. Waiting is the first liturgy, the cue to the Adyton, the inner place, moved like a tide inside a harbor, inching, retreating, inching. People were lined like reeds, each keeping his or her question tucked away like a sore you don't want a stranger to see. A soldier with a favor owed to him, and a scar shaped like a comma. A mother with knuckles gone pale around a scrap of wool. A merchant with the bore of worry drilled into his forehead. Nico stood among them, feeling how alive a crowd is when it is quiet. Sometimes the priests came out and asked a brief thing. Names, hometowns, what was tied around each person's heart. The soldiers knew how to answer. Short, firm, facts like stacked stones. The mothers answered with songs disguised as sentences. The merchants answered with numbers that would not add up. When it was Nico's turn, a man with soft eyelashes asked what had brought him. Nico tried 3 answers in his head. The sea took my friend. My sister's cough returns. The world feels tilted, and I think I must walk to the place where it is measured. But what came out of his mouth was simply, I fish. I want to know if the gods love us. The priest's eyelashes fluttered. He did not smile. He wrote something on a tablet that scraped slightly on its wax and sent Nico forward again. Inside, the air grew thick and cool. The smoke of laurel leaves braided with the sharp scent of burnt barley. The Pythia sat as everyone says she sits, on a tripod, above a cleft you cannot see and can only imagine as a dark throat where the earth breathes. Her hair was bound. Her face was not young, not old. Her voice, when it came, was not a single stream, but many trickles that found each other and made a river, only because other people dug the channels with their listening. It is kind to believe that everyone in that place tried their best. Priests, petitioners, God. Nico believed that as he lowered his eyes. He had thought he would bring his question like a clay cup to a fountain and carry away whatever fit. But the moment he stepped forward, words swelled and scattered. He saw Petros's grin. He saw Kira's braid loosen into a brown ribbon. He saw the goat's black eye rolling, the sea's plate quiet after, his mother's olives, the hook in his hand, a wave that never ended, the color of laurel smoke. He opened his mouth and managed only, "What do I owe?" It was, perhaps, the answer the world taught most of its children to ask. The Pythia's voice rose through a cadence that felt like walking uphill in soft sandals. The priest leaned in. Nico strained to hold the syllables. He wanted to carry them away and repeat them to himself until they softened. He heard something like, "Give what is due, and measure what you take." The sea has no master. The oar obeys the arm that holds it. To live is to enter a current. To defy it is to drown. Be the reed that bends, pay the temple, keep the feast, share your catch. What is owed is owed. It was not cruel. It was not kind. It was a fence. It was a map drawn by someone whose hand shook, but whose lines were straight. Nico felt relief come first. There is a way. And then the slow approach of the old question, rubbing its feet on his threshold. What if what is due is more than a person can pay? What if obedience is a word people use to hide the bruises inside it? When he stepped back into sun, the light felt brighter than it had an hour ago. The mountains wore their usual faces. The olive leaves made their usual shiver. His knees wanted a bench. His stomach wanted bread. But a thread now looped from his chest to the temple, and it pulled when he breathed. He sat beside an older man whose sandals had been mended many times and shared his last fig. The old man chewed and said nothing for a while, which is an old person's politeness, the gift of silence until you are ready for words. Then he told Nico that he had been to Delphi 3 times in his life, and that each time the god had told him the same thing in a different shape. Keep the order. The old man said the order had not kept his wife from dying or his son from leaving, but it had kept his hands busy and his house standing. You can take comfort where you find it, he said, even if you don't like who sells it. Nico smiled, because the old man had put a hard stone in a soft bag and given it to him as if it were bread. He did not want to carry this, but he did not know how to refuse. He walked to the edge of the terrace and looked down at the valley where the road unrolled like a pale ribbon. He thought of going home and giving a portion of every catch to the temple, as the priest said, and of feeling safe because he had paid for safety with fish and with fear. He also thought of never stepping into a boat again, leaving nets and oars to others, learning to shape wood or repair roofs, choosing a life the sea could not take a bite from. In each thought, Petros was still gone. Kira still coughed sometimes. The world still made of 1,000 bright pieces that did not fit snugly, no matter how you pressed them. That afternoon, he found a shaded wall and let his back learn its coolness. A child ran past with a twig, drawing a line in the dust as if writing a word the gods would be forced to read. Somewhere, a woman sang to herself as she counted coins, not greedily, just so she would not lose her place. Nico closed his eyes and felt the temple above him like a palm on his crown. He tried to pray and found instead a memory of his mother's hands pressing dough, folding and turning, until what had been sticky became smooth. He thought, maybe the gods are an idea you need because life is a sticky dough and your hands need something to do. At twilight, he wandered to the treasury roads and looked at the gifts other cities had given Apollo. Tripods, bowls, gleaming armor never worn in any real battle, inscriptions that sounded like men shouting their names into a cave. He felt small, and then did not feel small, because the scale of offerings does not change the scale of a heart's ache. In a niche, a small statue of a fisher bent over a net, simple, almost childlike, escaped his notice until he turned to leave. He touched the base, expecting cold, and found warmth instead, stored sun. He whispered without meaning to, "Do you love us?" The statue had no mouth to answer. After a while, the question stopped being about gods and started being about people. That night, he slept in the traveler's court, straw under his shoulder blades, the eucalyptus shadows moving on the ceiling, the way currents move under a boat. He dreamed a gentle dream. A hand counted fish on a table, and the number never reached its end. not because there were so many, but because the counting was always being interrupted by someone hungry who needed to be fed. In the dream, he did not mind the interruptions. The counting became a song. In the morning, he carried his question back to the temple, not to demand a different answer, but to test the first answer against a fresh light. He watched another goat shiver, another procession move slow as a thought through the columns. He stood out of the way and did what fishermen do best. He watched the water line where one thing meets another. He saw a terrified boy press a scrap of wool into his belt and look braver. He saw a rich man kneel and make his rich man's knee learn humility, if only for the time it took to kneel. He saw a priest hold the arm of an old woman as if it were the handle of a precious jar. He saw, in other words, people shaping themselves around belief, the way ivy shapes itself around a trellis. The trellis was rigid. The ivy was alive. He walked the sacred way alone, his sandals scuffing mica into little stars. He stopped before the porch of the Sibyls and read, slowly, the admonitions carved there, words about knowing oneself and avoiding excess. He understood these were not thunderbolts. They were instructions, written in small letters, meant to be traced by a finger on a slow day. He realized that what frightened him was not the rules, but the way rules could be used to excuse any hurt, to frame any loss as deserved. He whispered, "If I share my catch and keep the feast, will Petros come back?" The porch, honest as stone, did not lie. It simply held shade and let his sweat cool. He understood that the worst thing was not God smiting out of spite. The worst thing was people, frightened and tired, choosing to believe that suffering is a fair price for order, because the alternative, chaos, randomness, waves without motive, felt like standing on a deck that would never stop pitching. He walked down to the spring, where the water came out as if relieved to leave the rock. He cupped his hands and drank the way he was taught. Right hand first, left hand second. A pause between, as if giving the spring time to forgive him for being thirsty. He thought of Kira, of the cough that came and went. He thought of promising Apollo a measure of his catch, not because the god demanded, but because the act would braid him more tightly into his village, feeding the old men with the 3 jokes, the young mothers, the boys who raced with their ribs showing. He thought of leaving wreaths at the sea's edge, not as tribute, but as recognition. I do not own this. I am allowed to borrow it. He sat in the shade until the word obedience stopped scratching and began slowly to soften into attention. Attention is a fisherman's first craft. You watch the water for what it does not intend to show you. You learn when by listening around corners. You learn patience enough to sit on a still day and praise the stillness. If there is a God worth listening to, he thought, perhaps that God speaks in that language. If there is a dark side to gods, perhaps it is not a storm thrown in anger, but the way their names are used to justify whatever the strong want. He would be careful with names. He would not use them like oars to hit. When the sun slid, he rose. He left a coin in a dish, because it is good to pay for the roof that kept yesterday's rain off your head. He left the hook his grandfather had forged, because his grandfather's hands were gone now, and the hook would shine better among offerings than rust in a drawer. He kept the strip of dyed wool. He would tie it under the thwart of his boat so that memory and muscle would know the same knot. On the road down, he walked at the pace of shade, moving from one patch to the next, as if counting blessings in a quiet voice. A shepherd passed, humming. A girl with a basket of grapes held one out to him without breaking stride, and he ate it slowly, so he would not have to be finished with sweetness too soon. He thought of the sentence he had wanted from the god. Yes, we love you. And understood that sentences like that belonged to lullabies and lovers, not to temples. He knew he still wanted the sentence. He also knew he could live without it if he could make the wanting itself gentle. By the time the road became dust, and the dust became the low, salt, flat breath of the Gulf, he had made a promise, not a bargain, just a promise shaped like a man's own hand laid over his heart. He would go out at dawn, as he always had. He would take only what his boat could carry without harm. He would mend his neighbor's net as if it were his own. He would set aside a basket each week for the widows with thin wrists. He would not bring a goat to a god whose sky was already full of wings. If someone asked why, he would say, because a measure is not just fear of punishment, it is the shape of care. That night, before sleep, he spoke to Petros in the easy way the living talk to the dead when no one is listening. He said, I did not save you, but I can hold the rope for the next person who slips. If the gods love us, they will not mind. If they do not, I will still do it. He listened for an answer and received only the small rhythms of his house, his mother turning in her bed, Kira's breath, the old wood finding its groove. He smiled in the dark, not because he was happy, but because for once his inside matched the world's outside, and the match made a sound like a boat resting lightly against its mooring. Tok, tok, a soft assurance. He let that sound carry him down and down into sleep. In the morning, the sea was its ordinary self, which is to say, astonishing. He pushed the boat into the early light. The oars sat in the locks with that familiar cup and palm feel. He pulled, gentle, and the bow line let go of the shore's small anchor. He thought of Delphi high behind him, of laurel and goat and tripod and voice. He did not throw those away. He placed them where he could reach them if the weather changed. He tasted the salt, balanced the first cast, and, without needing permission from any sky, he began. The year in Nico's world is not a line, but a circle, and the circle is stitched together by rituals. The sea has its seasons, storms that muscle the horizon, calms that spread like oil, and the land has its own careful timetable. Olives gathered, grapes trodden, barley bent under a late summer sun. Around these practical labors, the city and the villages lace ceremonies like garlands. The calendar is how a people speaks to the invisible. We see you, we remember, we are doing what we are supposed to do. And inside that sentence, there is relief, like easing a heavy jar onto a shelf and hearing it settle. At dawn, smoke rises from small altars, the way breath rises from a sleeping mouth. A household sets out a shallow bowl, a little wine for a libation, a crumb of bread, a pinch of salt. Hands move without fuss, pour, touch, lift. And each small motion is a hinge on which a larger sense of safety swings. In the public square, the priests draw a circle on the ground and scatter barley so the place remembers to be sacred. A goat or a sheep is led forward, garlanded not because death is pretty, but because gratitude is. Someone sings a few steady lines. Someone else ties a ribbon with a sailor's patience. The knife is a tool like any other tool, used, cleaned, put away, and the smoke that goes up is carefully perfumed, fat mingled with spice so that the scent carries far and sweet. People will eat together after the prayers. Sacrifice is not a waste. It is a meal turned into meaning, communal hunger exchanged for communal trust. On another morning, at sea, a fisherman marks the sign of a very old habit over the water, not tracing a god's face, but acknowledging the rule the sea keeps. It gives and takes. If a squall rises and then folds away again without snapping the mast, a man will promise an offering, a handful of first fish, a wreath cast into the foam, because promises are a way to claim the day as survivable. In the market, a woman buying oil touches a small amulet at her neck, a blue glass eye that asks the world to pass by without malice. At a wedding, pairs of torches make an alley of light for the bride, and the smoke of laurel tells the air that this union has witnesses on both sides of the sky. Above all this, braided into everything, is the idea of fate, the moirai, the three who weave, measure, and cut. They are not villains. They are not even judges. They are a method. In weavers' houses, girls practice with wool, the very gestures the fates perform with lives. Clotho draws a thread from a cloud of fiber. Lachesis measures a length along her arm. Atropos holds a small blade too sharp to think about for long. The gestures are ordinary, and that is what makes them powerful. Fate is not thunder. Fate is routine. When Nico watches his sister braid and unbraid her hair, he sees a parable with soft hands. A strand goes over, a strand goes under. Pattern is made by patience. The comfort is obvious. If life is thread, then maybe it can be held. If it is a pattern, then maybe there is a logic kinder than chaos. But the comfort comes with a price tag stitched into its hem. Obedience is the social fabric, and fear of curse is the dye that keeps the color from running. At the edge of every festival is a boundary no one wants to cross. Hubris, that swelling of the self beyond its proper measure. Children learn the story, the way they learn which fish have bones you must watch for. Do not take more than is yours. Do not speak as if you were taller than you are. Do not laugh at the wrong time. Do not call attention you cannot pacify. The answer to hubris is nemesis, the redressing force. The words sound like thunderheads massing over a field, but in daily life they are much quieter. An old woman's look that makes you untie a ribbon and do it again. A chorus in a play saying, "No, not that way," in a voice that is also your mother's voice. There is also miasma, the idea of ritual uncleanness, which can be as simple as touching death or breaking an oath. Miasma is not dirt. It cannot be scrubbed. It spreads like worry, and it is cured by the right sequence of gestures and words. If a crime goes unspoken, the air in a house grows thick. If a person returns from a funeral, he stands by the door while someone pours water over his hands and feet to keep grief from colonizing the floorboards. You do not bring certain foods into certain rooms, not because the gods are picky eaters, but because boundaries, once kept, are themselves a kind of prayer. A curse, era, is not only a shouted wish for harm, but also a carelessly aimed word that catches on a neighbor's life. So people speak carefully. Silence itself becomes part of the ritual. The held breath before an oath, the pause that lets a promise cool before it's carried away. Walk now, gently, into a city at festival time. The Panathenaia lifts Athens into a bright arrangement of sound and color. The streets run toward the Acropolis like rivers toward a spring. Women have been weaving a sacred robe, a peplos, for months, the warp set straight, the weft crossing like well-trained feet. The garment is enormous, sky-colored, embroidered with a god's victory over chaos, and it will be carried like a sail up to the statue of Athena, who stands with her spear not to threaten, but to hold the horizon in place. Flutes and drums lay down a steady road for the feet to follow. Young men carry olive branches and look briefly like trees walking. Cavalry horses dance, their hooves spelling out a message the stones already know. We are here, we belong. Runners bring in the relay flame, handing it gently as if it were a baby. At the top, offerings are laid. The new robe, small jars of oil, sweet cakes slashed with a pattern that looks like fields from a hill. Everyone is inside the music. Even those who watch from shade are inside it. The city is showing itself to itself. Strong, orderly, generous, brave. Children will remember the sight the way you remember a lighted stadium the first time you walked up the steps and the whole field lapped at your eyes in green waves. For a day, chaos cannot find a seat. Order looks like kindness. And yet, woven into the bright cloth, there are threads that itch. Down in the theater at the city Dionysia, a chorus in masks is telling a story about a king who mapped his whole life around a prophecy and still could not step out of its shadow. About a woman who imagined herself faithful until a god disguised as a swan touched the door of her logic and it swung wide. About a commander so bent on a win for his ships that he put his daughter on an altar and called the act holy. The people listening do not think they are learning new facts. They think they are listening to the city talk in its sleep. The chorus rocks them, voice against voice, until the line between right and necessary blurs, until the audience understands what the gods in these stories insist upon. Order ought to cost something, and the cost is often paid by someone who did not sign the contract. The names change and arrange themselves. Iphigenia, led to a shore with a calm sea and a hard choice. Polyxena, a girl whose life became a coin dropped into the well of a hero's honor. Orestes, shouldering a command he did not draft. Heracles, struck by madness that a neighbor could have mistaken for heat stroke until it wasn't. The plays do not splash. They do not show. They intone. They suggest. They let the chorus press hands to cheeks. They let the audience lean forward into the old question with the newest of ears. Is this the price for wins and walls and victories? In the open air, above masks and lines, gulls wheel. The gulls do not know a tragedy is being staged. The sea beyond continues its very old work, shaping, erasing, laying down silver in long strokes. The city comes away from the theater sobered, bright garments softening, steps a little slower, as if the body itself were a tablet on which a god had written, "Keep the order, beware the cost." Not all festivals speak of pain. The Eleusinian mysteries carry their secret promise like a bowl with both hands. In the long procession from Athens to Eleusis, torches bob and whisper in the dusk. People walk together, women with women, men with men, the young close to the old, the poor indistinguishable from the notable. They are reenacting a mother's search for her lost daughter, Demeter looking for Persephone, grief moving through the world until the world learns how to answer. There is a drink at the end of a long hunger, plain, barley, and mint, and a story told with the kind of care that convinces the heart it has not been left alone after all. Those who step inside the sanctuary afterwards are not allowed to speak about what they saw, not for fear of punishment alone, but because some comforts lose their shape when explained. They come back with something that behaves like hope, a quiet knowledge that the underworld is not only a lock, but also a door. The city keeps this counterweight carefully, as you keep a smooth stone in a pocket for worried fingers. Between these great gatherings are the smaller rituals that glue life together. Oaths sworn over a shard of pottery because breaking it after will remind you to keep your word now. Tiny lead tablets scratched with appeals to the divine. Defixians, curse tablets, buried in wells by people who could find no other way to tip the scales. A mother whispers a protective formula and touches a child's hairline, not because she believes her words are metal, but because the child relaxes when the words pass over him, and that is already part of the cure. A sailor nails a votive plaque in the shape of a leg to a shrine after his limb knits clean from a break. In a corner of a house, a shelf holds the old gods and the newest ones, clay and wood and bronze, side by side, because you never know which neighbor you will need in a crisis. To understand obedience here is to understand belonging. You do not obey because someone is always watching. You obey because the net is stronger than the single strand, the wall tighter when each brick knows its place. The idea of a curse is the negative of this photo. What happens when the weaving snarls? You may not be able to see an offense, but you can feel the snag as surely as a fisherman feels a knot slide under his thumb. You do not risk the city's luck with careless talk. You do not cut a festival because work has piled up. You work harder before, rest during, work harder after. If a man refuses the ritual or mocks it loudly, the city does not necessarily drag him to a punishment, but doors close to him the way shutters close before a storm. If a person behaves as if only his own thread matters, he soon finds himself cold in a fabric he can no longer enter. Nico grew up inside this web. He knows the names of feast days the way you know the names of uncles. Some you adore, some you endure, but all of them are yours. On the calends of a new month, he smudges his doorway with smoke because his mother did. On the day the Thesmophoria begins, a women's festival, he keeps out of the way with the tact men learn when wisdom is in progress elsewhere. When the Anthesteria opens the jars of new wine, he watches for the point where joy tips into something that wants to use a god's name as an excuse. He has seen men come home in the evening and blame Dionysus for what they chose at noon. He has seen men who chose nothing at all be made into examples by those who did. This is the city's shadow, the divine used like a shield for ordinary appetite, the worst thing wearing holy clothing, and therefore hard to distinguish at a glance. Listen closely to the social norm voiced by the chorus, by the priests, by the way neighbors look at one another. Stay within your measure. The Greek word sophrosine, balance, moderation, soundness of mind, sits like a stone at the bottom of a clear river. You can see it always, even when the water runs fast. When you are praised, you step back half a pace so the light can fall on the God first. When you are wronged, you take your case not to the road with a knife, but to a court with a stone ballot, because revenge breeds miasma and judgment cleans it. When something wonderful happens, you make an offering, not because you are paying a bill, but because gratitude is the only shape joy can keep without splitting at the seams. Now, consider the contrast that runs through this social fabric like a fine wire. On one hand, the bright order of processions, woven robes, public meals, children lifted to see the glittering helmets, the communal cry when the torch arrives, a sober pride that does not need trumpets to be heard. On the other hand, the stories every child knows about necessary cruelty. A city spared because a single life was given, winds bought with a father's tears, peace held together by a thread that saws a little at the skin. The plays carve these contrasts into the air so they can be looked at without inviting them home. The people watching are not monsters. They are careful, affectionate, petty, brave. They love their children and their neighbors and their favorite fig seller. They also live inside a story where obedience is safer than questioning, where defiance can be labeled hubris and punished in a way that makes the crowd shiver and say, "It is right." In the harbor, a father ties a charm on his son's wrist before the boy climbs to the masthead for the first time. In the hills, a mother tells her daughter not to speak a certain name when lightning stands on the mountains like a tripod. In the court, a man places his hand on a small statue and promises to tell the truth, because the truth belongs to the God whom the statue remembers. Everywhere, the Moirae are invoked, not formally, but in the way people shrug after doing their best, in the way they say, "It was time," in the way they accept bad weather or the idiocy of a magistrate as fibers spun somewhere above human reach. Acceptance can be wisdom. It can also be a drug. The line between those two is thin, and most days the city walks it without looking down. When Nico returned from Delphi, carrying a sentence he did not know how to wear, he re-entered a world that makes sense by ritual. The old men at the bench greeted him with a palm slapped softly against a knee and a joke told twice. A neighbor asked, politely, if the god had been generous. The priest's boy, who was 14 and already taller than the door of the shrine, offered him a date and asked if the Pythia's voice sounds like thunder or like his mother. Nico gave each person what the day required: a nod, a shrug, a small smile. He stopped by the low altar that marks the edge of the beach and crumbled bread into the water, not because the sea eats bread, but because he wanted his breath to match a pattern larger than his worry. That night, a procession moved through the lanes. Not a great festival, just a village rite that comes around when the moon is neatly halved. Lamps were cupped in hands. The song was simple and could be learned by the second verse. At a corner, a woman with a baby touched the flame to a sprig of rosemary and traced smoke over the baby's forehead, the way a finger traces a name carved on a gate. You belong to here, and here belongs to you. Nico walked behind an old fishmonger whose shoulder had shaped itself around a basket over so many years that it looked like a riddle the gods would have to answer if they wished to judge him. When the procession reached the little shrine, everyone fell into the practiced geometry of standing and stopping and waiting without order being shouted. The priest said a few words about measure, about generosity, about the sea's fairness and the land's patience. Nobody cried. Nobody cheered. Nobody argued with a god. A ribbon was tied. The smoke rose. The world held. Inside this calm, the darker stories still lived. A king sacrificing a daughter for wind. A girl promised to a grave so a city would be safe. Heroes who returned crowned and somehow lonelier. The city did not draw the curtains on them. It told them in the theater, under a sky that would not blush. The stories were warnings dressed as entertainment, mirrors passed hand to hand, lessons smoothed by repetition until they could be held without cutting. And yet, because they were told often and with great seriousness, they became part of the furniture. A bench you sit on, a threshold you step over without thinking. This is the hinge on which the worst thing swings. Not that gods crave pain, but that people normalize pain when it can be filed under fate or order or duty. Still, people are people. They make room for mercy in the very rules that might have strangled them. In courts, jurors hear a chorus of witnesses and then sometimes choose leniency. A man who mocked a holy day brings double oil the next time and is welcomed with a wink that says we remember and we forgive. A storm takes a boat, and the priest insists on sacrifices, but the village also brings bread and mends nets and watches for the widow's lamp, making sure it never goes out. The rituals that once seemed like chains reveal themselves as threads that can flex. The Moirai keep their work. The people adjust the weave. If you listen to the city when it believes no one is listening, you can hear its true prayer. It is not for victory, though victory is nice. It is not for wealth, though wealth is convenient. It is for measure, that joy be held without spilling, that grief be contained without rotting the house, that the sea give and take with the old fairness. That power, when it enters, be put into harness and made to pull like any other animal. The prayer is that a person may live a life the size of a person and not be stretched on a God-sized rack. Nico sits with this in the quiet after a festival when the night smells of smoke and laughter and the sleepy sour of last wine. He thinks of the chorus telling the city uncomfortable truths in comfortable rhythms. He thinks of the thread the Moirai pinch between finger and thumb, sometimes letting it slip, sometimes drawing it taut. He thinks of how obedience can be a form of love and how it can also be a shadow where cruelty stands and calls itself holy. He ties a new knot in a net and makes it neat, because neatness in such things saves time later and prevents swearing, and swearing breeds trouble. He sets aside a basket for the old woman whose son is still at sea. He chooses to keep the feast, and in keeping it, he keeps himself. Around him, the social world hums like a hive that knows its queen. The festivals will come and go. The smoke will rise. The chorus will sing grief into wisdom and wisdom into sleep. And in the morning, when the first color returns to the world, he will walk down to the water with the others, obedient not to terror, but to attention, to what the sea says today, to the wind's tone, to the way the boats knock softly together at their moorings, like neighbors exchanging greetings through a thin wall. Tok, tok, a promise as small and steady as any prayer. Settle your shoulders. Let the breath fall into an easy rhythm. We are going to walk through 4 old doorways, stories you already know by heart, though you may not have met them this gently. We'll step through each one and look not for monsters, but for the quiet mechanism behind them, how order is kept, how fear is managed, how a community explains pain to itself so it can sleep at night. Then we'll ask the soft, stubborn question, were the gods cruel, or did people make masks for their own weather and call the masks divine? Begin with a mountain and a chain. Prometheus. He is not a storm god or a warlord. He is a bringer. He brings fire, light to see by, heat to make food safe, flame to temper metal and make tools that can lift more than hands alone. For this gift, the sky punishes him in a way that refuses to end. Bound to a rock, a bird coming to eat what grows back, a pain that resets to morning. The old story is spare. It doesn't shout. It simply says, there was a helper. Help was called a crime. The sentence had no finish. Why would a culture keep such a story close? Because it explains why good deeds can make trouble. It warns craftsmen and lovers and midwives and rebels that gifts unbalance power. If ordinary people can carry fire, the palace loses some of its glow. If ordinary people can learn, a god's specialness shrinks. So the tale protects order by making generosity suspect, and yet Even as it frightens, it comforts. Prometheus endures. He does not bless his captors. He does not confess to wrongdoing. He suffers and remains himself. Pain does not change him into what it wants. In a society where innovation could be read as arrogance, the myth prays two prayers at once. May the bringers be brave, and may power forgive being made less necessary. Now ajar, misremembered as a box, sitting in a plain room. Pandora. She is made, not born, a woman assembled by gifts from many hands. Beauty, skill, charm. She is sent as an answer to a theft of fire, and told what every child is told. Do not open that. She opens it. Out fly the troubles, sickness, hard labor, envy, grief, all the small, toothy things that make a life ache. At the bottom, the story says, something remains. We call it hope. A harsh reading says Pandora's curiosity ruined everything. And so women, curiosity, and trust must be watched. But if you sit with the myth until it stops shouting and starts talking, something else appears. The jar does not manufacture suffering. It stores what the world already contains and keeps it from your eyes. Opening it does not create pain. It reveals pain. The worst thing here is not a woman's hands or a mind that wants to know. The worst thing is the rule that says ignorance is the price of safety, that says you must not look behind the curtain even if your life is happening there. And what of hope at the bottom? Was it mercy saved or mercy withheld? Some said hope was trapped, rationed, a promise the powerful keep in their cupboard and pass out in spoonfuls. Others said hope stayed, so it could be kept close, a household god you feed and that feeds you back. The culture did not agree, which is part of its honesty. The myth holds two truths at once. Knowing hurts, not knowing hurts. The jar is not a trick, it is a mirror. Now a windless harbor, a line of ships stalled, a father asked to make his child into weather. Iphigenia. The army will not sail unless Artemis is honored with a price. The priests read the air. The god demands a girl. The commander is a father. The father is a commander. He chooses the city over the daughter, calls it duty, calls it holy, and the story breathes in through its teeth. In some tellings, the goddess relents at the last instant, whisking the girl away and leaving a deer in her place, as if to say the lesson is the point, not the blood. In others, no miracle comes. Either way, the hinge squeals. Order has its tariff. Innocence is the coin that fits the slot. Greek audiences did not need help understanding what this means. They lived in a world where public safety was built from private losses, sons gone to war, daughters joined to strangers, a harvest turned into tax. The myth makes an obscene calculus explicit. If you want wind, give flesh. And then it asks the audience to watch the father's face. The cruelty is not only in the knife, it is in the way language is used to make knives sound like laws. The god here is not a creature in the sky. The god is the sentence, necessary sacrifice. The chorus repeats it until the words sound noble. The play lets you feel the scrape those words leave behind. Finally, an apple thrown like a small star into a room crowded with pride. The judgment of Paris. Three powerful figures, Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, ask a shepherd to decide what cannot be measured, who is the fairest. Each offers a bribe. He takes the one that tastes most like a dream. Love of the most beautiful woman in the world. He gets it, but the world tears around the seam. A city burns. Friends fall. A long war empties the years into graves, and in the dust of it, you can see the shape of the first decision. Vanity turned into policy. Private desire enlarged into public ruin. Here, the worst thing is not a particular goddess's temper. It is the way a small, unserious choice, gossip with prizes, slides into catastrophe because no one at the top refuses the slide. The gods move people around like game pieces. People accommodate themselves to being moved and then call the motion fate. The myth becomes an X-ray. Leaders seduced by flattery, citizens drafted into someone else's romance, a continent learning to name a grievance after the fact so it will sound respectable. And again, the chorus in the theater is a warning bell rung at a distance you can consider without burning your hand. Breathe in slowly. Let the pulse settle. We have looked at 4 doors. What do we see behind them? A pattern. It is not that the gods are one-note villains. Greek gods are lively, local, and contradictory, capable of favor and fury, picnics and punishments. What the myths do is translate human realities into divine plots so those realities can be held. Power needs obedience and invents reasons for it. Communities want predictability and draw rules around it. Innovation endangers hierarchy and is checked. Curiosity threatens the existing story and is mothered or murdered depending on the decade. Innocence is traded for collective safety when leaders feel cornered. Vanity recruits armies. Then the winners write hymns and the losers write laments, and both become sacred tradition. So, are the gods cruel or were humans projecting? The soft answer is yes to both, but in different ways. The gods are masks for forces that outlive any one person. Weather, appetite, luck, the crowd, the office, the algorithm, the market. They act cruelly when those forces run without reins. Humans project when they give the force a face and then insist that the face justifies what they wanted to do anyway. If a storm is just weather, a king must admit he built too close to the sea. If a storm is Poseidon in a mood, the king can take a goat to a stone and call the problem solved. If a war begins with trade and pride and fear, then merchants and elders share blame. If it begins because a goddess felt slighted, then blame is frictionless and permanent, and nothing must change. The brilliance and the danger of these myths is how useful they are. They are tools. In the right hands, they pry open compassion. Prometheus teaches us to honor those who bring light. Pandora teaches us to make peace with knowing. Iphigenia teaches us to suspect any necessity that spills innocent blood. Paris teaches us to laugh tenderness out of politics before politics makes tenderness expensive. In the wrong hands, the same tales become permissions. Punish the bringer, shame the curious, spend the pure, glamorize the petty. The stories are not to blame. The use is. Now, bring the lamp closer. Tilt it gently toward our own time. The shapes on the wall do not change much. Prometheus wears new clothes. He is a researcher sharing a discovery for the public good and finding himself sued into silence. He is a whistleblower who brings firelight to a dark room and discovers that the room preferred the dark. He is the teacher who puts tools in the hands of students the city did not expect to become tool users. The chain is subtler. Contracts, lawsuits, policies, social punishment. But the logic is old. If your gift threatens the gatekeepers, expect the eagle. Pandora's jar sits on every desk, a glowing screen, a door that opens with a tap. Do not click, we are told. Do click, we are told. Curiosity is celebrated until it points at a ledger, a pipeline, a history meant to stay tidy. The troubles fly out. Misinformation, outrage, fatigue. At the bottom remains hope, sometimes captive in a platform's design. doled out by an interface like a treat, sometimes truly kept, handmade in small communities that refuse to let confusion win. The myth teaches gentleness with our looking. Learn to open without ripping. Learn to close without locking. Iphigenia stands at policy tables wearing 1,000 names. She is the child who breathes unhealthy air because a factory feeds a city. She is the underpaid worker asked to give up weekends for the team. She is the soldier whose youth buys a stability older people will enjoy. She is the patient asked to wait because budgets have rules. Always, the language is shiny. Sacrifice, duty, necessary. The old story asks us to set the knife down and look at the face we are naming price. It does not say, never pay. It says, pay honestly, and not always with the youngest coin. The judgment of Paris is every meeting where ego is the agenda, and no one says so. Every beauty contest built into an economy. Every rumor that grows teeth and then laws. It is also, more quietly, the way small private appetites, status, cliques, envy, scale up into public messes when institutions are too flattered to say no. The apple still rolls, glinting. The choice is still intimate and foolish and consequential. The war still costs people who never went near the orchard. And what of fate? The Moirai today have the faces of systems, logistics and code, insurance tables and zoning maps, supply chains and best practices, the guided path a website lays under your feet to keep you scrolling. A thread is measured. A thread is cut. A person gets a letter that begins, "We regret to inform you," and a life bends. The old comfort remains, pattern, predictability, and so does the old risk, calling the system sacred when it's just convenient. Ancient Athens used theater to teach suspicion of two neat stories. We use satire, journalism, and sometimes nothing at all, because we are tired. The myths nudge us, keep a chorus. Let someone say, rhythmically and out loud, beware the cost. If the worst in Greek myth were only gore and thunder, we could close the book and sleep easy, promising to avoid altars and apples. But the worst is tenderer and closer. It is how easily a community learns to normalize pain when pain wears a seal that says approved by order. It is how quickly we forgive power for being power. How ready we are to believe that a goat or a girl or a town downwind ought to pay because the wind needs paying. It is the speed with which we accept that curiosity is dangerous, that gifts are theft, that vanity deserves troops. Listen, though. The same tradition that told these hard tales also built antidotes into itself. Tragedy puts crimes on a stage so they can't hide. Comedy drags the pompous into the daylight and makes them dance. Philosophy goes to the marketplace and asks questions until the crowd groans and smiles. The festivals feed everyone. The mysteries whisper that the door to the underworld swings both ways, and that grain dies to rise, and that mothers do not search forever. The old world knew the worst and taught ways to keep it from being all there is. So we hold two candles. One illuminates the risk, stories used to excuse harm. The other illuminates the repair, stories used to unteach cruelty. When you bring those lamps closer to your own room, you can see enough to make nightly vows as small and sturdy as the ones Nico made on the terrace at Delphi. Honor the bringers. Be gentle with looking. Refuse the sacrifice that hides its victim inside a word. Call vanity by its right name before it drafts you. And when the system says fate, ask if it means habit. When it says order, ask if it means kindness. When it says necessary, ask for whom. Breathe slowly. The old mountains are blue in the distance. Olive leaves turn their pale undersides to the wind and make that soft rain sound again. The sea in the mind lies quiet as polished stone. The oars are shipped. The boat rocks and then settles. Above everything, the sky holds no grudges. It is wide and emptied of old shouts. The myths are still here, but they are furniture now. You can move them, sit on them, refinish them, pass them down with notes tucked in the drawers. The worst thing is known. Naming it is not frightening. It is relief. With the naming comes choice. Let the choice be simple tonight. Let it be a breath-length promise the size of your own chest. I will not turn pain into policy. I will not call fear a god. I will keep hope where I can reach it. I will put my shoulder to order only when order carries mercy, and I will step aside when it does not. The room grows quieter. The lamp burns lower. We have looked at the old faces and found our own. We have looked at our own and found, under them, the old. Close your eyes. The chorus has finished for now. The stage is dark. The audience stands softly and goes home. The city sleeps, and in its sleep, it practices kindness. Let the breath stay slow. We are going to raise the volume for a few minutes, but we'll do it carefully, the way a musician swells a note and then lets it fall back into calm. Think of a tide that knows when to turn. When it reaches its furthest line in the sand, it pauses, listens to the moon, and then glides home. Escalation. The first crest comes on a high, bare ledge. Prometheus is there, iron against skin, wind in his ears, the world stretched in blue and stone below him. He is bound not for a season, but for a pattern. Pain that starts over at dawn, endurance that starts over with it. The bird arrives as the sun clears the ridge. It is not a monster. It is appetite on wings, doing what hunger does. Each day, it takes what the body regrows. Each day, the body regrows what the bird expects. Around this repetition, the world proceeds. Shepherds whistle, clouds snag on peaks, snows melt, grass is green. No rescue yet, no fiery speech from the sky. Only the little acts of weather and the steady fact of pain. Listen closer. There is a second story in the scene that the old poets trusted you to hear, defiance that does not need an audience. Prometheus speaks to the air, sometimes to the rock, sometimes to the far-off sea. He tells the wind he would do it again. He says the fire was worth the price because the price belongs to him and the gift belongs to everyone else. There is a steadiness in choosing once and then paying daily without renegotiating the choice. The chain is iron. The will is something else. If the gods meant the sentence to break him, they misread the mathematics of meaning. Pain multiplies when it is senseless. When it belongs to a vow, it divides. Hold that thought. Let the wave run further. Down on a windless shore, an army waits. Sails hang like folded wings. The altars smoke polite and ineffective. A father stands where commanders stand, his name larger than his body, and before him is Iphigenia, who is simply herself. There is no special music for this. Witnesses cough, sandals grit on stone. Someone adjusts a strap. The girl looks at her father and sees not a general or a symbol, but the person who used to lift her with one arm and make a show of how heavy she had become. She also sees the line of ships and the faces that look to him for weather. She knows what story the city prefers. Winds bought with tears, victory patched with a daughter's cloth. Some versions lift her away at the last instant, dear in her place, lesson paid in metaphor. Others do not blink. The escalation is not in the blade, it is in the language. Necessity is invoked, that shining word. Piety is spoken, another shine. The chorus murmurs forms of "it must be so." A man who loves his child more than his own breath learns how to stand very still and hold his face like a statue's face, because the city is watching, because the priest is watching, because the logic he accepted has no exit that leaves him innocent. He has mistaken obedience for safety. Now he sells what cannot be replaced to keep the bargain neat. Hold that too, a little further still. Now a road slants down into shadow and music. Orpheus walks it, a man who can change weather with a lyre string, who can lean a note against a door and make it open. He is not going down to steal. He is going to ask, which is rarer. His song makes the stones listen, and they admit him. The realm of the dead is not a horror here, it is a rule. The rule pauses to hear him. He lays out his ask, one life back, one name, Eurydice, only her, no other. Just this thread rewoven where it was cut. The rulers answer with a condition so thin it looks kind. You may lead her out. Do not look back. A single instruction. A test that can be passed. Order may flex, they imply, if love will keep its eyes forward. He walks, and she walks behind. Her footfalls do not sound. Her presence is a temperature difference across his shoulders. The path is long. The rule is thin. The mind is louder than any liar. Is she there? Is this a trick? Is hope a leash? He holds himself as still as walking allows, and the exit grows brighter, and the effort becomes a tremble, a stammer in the spine, those last few steps where belief feels like stepping onto glass. He turns. Of course he turns. He cannot grow a third hand to hold himself at that moment. He is only a person. She is there, and then she is not, second losses being the quietest and most total. He is left with an empty corridor and the echo of his own name. 3 crests, 3 edges, 3 places where old listeners felt their own throats tighten, and a city shifted on its benches. What do they have in common besides ache? Each exposes a sentence that power likes to keep tidy. Prometheus reveals what punishment looks like when it wants to stop a gift from traveling. Iphigenia reveals what the word necessary does to faces we love. Orpheus reveals where rule bends without breaking, and how a human hand shakes at the fault line. The escalation is simply clarity. The myths are bright enough that you cannot pretend not to see the cost. Now, slowly, lower the water. Let the tide find its pause. Resolution. If these were only catalogs of pain, they would leave us cold or wild. But the old storytellers and the audiences who sat under open sky to hear them did not stop at the hurt. They looked for what endures in the hurt. Start again with the man on the rock. Wind still, bird fed, chain sure. What remains when the scene is stripped? Witness. Prometheus is alone, and still he bears himself as if someone decent were watching. This is not performance. It is a way of keeping your shape. In some tellings, a friend will come. Heracles, passing by on his own path, taking pity and snapping what was meant to be unbreakable. Even if you set aside rescue, the story leaves an older truth. Generosity is not a transaction. A gift that exposed everyone else's smallness will always be punished by people who measure their worth by scarcity. And yet, to keep giving, knowledge, light, warmth, on the days when chains are only social and the eagle is only a glare, is to choose freedom inside constraint. The hope here is not naive. It says, do your work as if it is worth the price, and in time someone will cut you loose, or you will discover you have loosened yourself, link by link, by refusing to consent to less. Move to the shore. The altar is quiet now. The news of what did or did not happen there walks ahead like weather into the camp. Where is hope in a story that spends a daughter? It hides in two places. First, in the chorus, who do not collapse into cheer or rage, but keep naming what is wrong with a careful tongue. They refuse to call the price beautiful. They turn language back toward truth, which is a civic mercy. Second, in the women who carry the aftermath, the mothers, the attendants, even the goddess when she is written as pitying rather than demanding. In later tellings, Iphigenia survives to become a priestess who refuses future blood. She becomes a keeper of ritual that does not devour the innocent. That is a quiet revolution buried like a seed. Take the role that cost you and remake it so no one else pays. Now go with Orpheus, empty-handed, back into the daylight he had hoped to share. His second loss could be the end of song. He could put the lyre away and let silence stand for wisdom. In some versions, he sings only sad songs and is torn by people who do not want sadness in the square. In the version that makes sense for sleep, for healing, he keeps playing, but the music changes. It does not argue with rules. It comforts those hurt by rules. It meets each listener where breath catches in the chest and smooths the catch with time. The gift is not rescue, it is company. The hope here is not in bending the underworld. It is in bending the day toward kindness, a festival where grief has a seat and is fed. When you look across these resolutions, they add up to something steady: compassion, freedom of conscience, courage not to obey harm. Compassion is the chorus that speaks true and the friend who loosens a shackle. Freedom of conscience is Prometheus deciding daily that the gift was right, even when alone. Courage not to obey harm is Iphigenia as priestess refusing to pass the knife forward. Orpheus teaches the craft that carries all three. Find a tone that invites people closer without tearing them awake. Make space where hurt can lay its head down and be lightened by being seen. Bring this home to Nico, the fisherman with salt in his cuticles and questions in his ribs. What does escalation teach him? That systems will gladly spend him if he lets them define duty for him. That gifts may draw sharp eyes. That love can fail tests no one should have to take. What does resolution offer? A way to live that answers cruelty without becoming its clerk. He can make small, stubborn vows, to use his tools for others, even when the harbor gossip disapproves. To ask what a rule is protecting, and if the answer is someone's pride, to step around it. To keep the festivals that feed the village and quietly refuse the rituals that demand a victim. In the village theater, a troupe performs a tragedy, and the crowd breathes together, and the last lines fall like dusk. The actors bow. The masks look oddly humble in the hands that wore them. People rise and stretch. Some go home lighter, some heavier, but the square holds them all. An old woman, leaving, touches the shoulder of a boy who cried at the altar scene. That was a story, she says, and also a lamp. He doesn't understand yet, but he will. Stories show where the stones are in the river. You still have to cross, but you don't have to slip. Let the tide finish turning. The mountain holds night. Somewhere, a chain lies quiet on a ledge where a bird has closed one eye and then the other. In houses, fathers sit with daughters and laugh at nothing important, and a city's need for wind shrinks back to its right size. In rooms where grief has a chair, music travels between people, like breath passed kindly from one chest to another. Hope is not locked in a jar. It is passed in bowls at a table. It is learned by practice. Share the catch. Tell the truth about costs. Choose the version of the ritual that heals. You do not have to fix the sky to sleep. You only have to make one clear promise that meets the worst stories on their own ground and declines their invitation. I will not name harm as holy. If you want a second promise, let it be this: I will keep my fire moving. Knowledge, warmth, skill, despite how it annoys those who like things dim. And a third, soft enough to tuck under your tongue. When told not to look back, I will look forward. When I must look back, I will do it gently, with help, in daylight. Breathe in. The air smells of resin and bread again. Breathe out. The drums are far away. The sea is near and even. The world has not become perfect. It has become clear enough to carry. The escalation has done its work. It showed you the sharp edges without cutting you. The release does the rest. It smooths those edges with understanding and sets them down. Let that smoothness spread from throat to shoulders to hands. Let your jaw soften. Feel the bed hold you with an old city's calm. If the gods are masks for weather and want, then tonight we choose different masks: patience, measure, mercy. Put them on. They fit. The room darkens by degrees. The last lamp goes out. What remains are the small guarantees humans can make to one another. The net mended before dawn. The coin left in the dish. The song hummed while sweeping a threshold. The hand on a shoulder in a crowd leaving a play. This is the seed the worst stories could not crush. This is the answer that does not need thunder. Let the tide rest. We will close our eyes, and if we dream of mountains and altars and corridors, we will also dream of chains falling, deer leaping, and a figure at the mouth of a cave, setting down his lyre, not in surrender, but in care, because someone nearby has already fallen asleep. Let your breath slow, in and out. If the earlier hours were a climb, this is the long, easy path down, among thyme and pale stones, where every step is simple and the air smells clean. The myths we've walked through were never just about gods. They were mirrors, polished not with flattery, but with need. People stood before them and tried to understand weather and war, hunger and luck, love, and the way a life can turn on a word. If a storm broke ships, it felt kinder to call it a mood than a randomness. If a king made a cruel bargain, it was easier to say a goddess demanded it than to say we did not know how to stop him. The stories gave names to the nameless pressures: fate when patterns held, curse when harm repeated, blessing when a door opened just when a hand reached for it. When the Greeks spoke of Prometheus, Pandora, Iphigenia, Paris, they weren't building a museum of cruelty. They were mapping a human interior. Prometheus is the stubborn conviction that light belongs to everyone. Pandora is the ache of wanting to know, and the sting that sometimes follows knowing. Iphigenia is the fragile, sacred question of how much we will pay to keep an order standing. Paris is the soft vanity in us that can tip kingdoms. Each tale lays a tool beside the bed: suspicion of easy necessity, tenderness for those who bring gifts, caution with our appetites, reverence for curiosity practiced like a craft. The myths, then, are not commands. They are diagnoses and dreams. They say, here is where pain enters. Here is where consolation might be found. They ask you to locate yourself on the map and choose a direction with eyes open. And when the plays ended under that clean attic sky, when the chorus fell quiet and sandals whispered away, people didn't become different creatures. They ate, they loved, they worried, they worked. But the mirror had been held steady long enough that surface and depth felt, for a while, aligned. Now, return to your own room, your own century. We no longer bring goats to altars or lay bronze knives on cooling stones. We have different words, different podiums, different ledgers, but we still offer. We offer what is dear in currencies the old world would recognize: hours, attention, presence. We set them on the altars of glowing screens, urgent schedules, elegant dashboards, immaculate plans. We say, just this weekend, just this quarter, just until I catch up. And time, which is the true gold, flows away in thin streams, each concession too small to name until the bowl is light in the hands. The Moirai have changed clothes, but not trades. They sit quietly inside settings and defaults. Inside the paths, a system lays under your cursor. Inside policies that sound like weather. A thread is spun. A goal, a metric, a target. A thread is measured. Performance, engagement, alignment. A thread is cut. An opportunity gone. A season missed. A friendship unanswered long enough to fade. We tell ourselves the story that hurts least. It had to be so. Sometimes it did. Often it did not. Often, we simply lacked a chorus to sing us awake while the decision was still small. The old city used ritual to make meaning and drama to question it. We can do the same with quieter tools. We can mark a threshold each morning, a cup of water before the phone, a window opened, a sentence of gratitude spoken aloud so the room hears it. We can restore a chorus at the places where harm hides in ordinary words. When necessary appears, ask for whom. When fate appears, ask whose settings. When order appears, ask, does it carry mercy? These are small choruses, gentled to a bedtime whisper, but they keep the mirror clear. Think of hope, that contested passenger at the bottom of Pandora's jar. Some said it was trapped, kept from us, rationed by the powerful. Others said it stayed, so we could find it without searching the world. Tonight, let hope be near. Let it be household and handmade, placed where your hand can fall on it in the dark. A book you trust, a name you can text, a practice your body knows without debate. Breath counted softly to 4, shoulders lowered, jaw unhooked. Hope need not be loud. It can be a steady thing that does not leave, like a lamp on a low shelf, like the soft knock of boats at their moorings. Tok, tok, a promise that the harbor remembers you. We no longer sacrifice daughters for wind, but we sometimes trade our own days for storms we did not choose. We no longer carve curses into lead, but careless words still rust the air. We no longer ask a Pythia for a sentence, but we receive sentences from calendars and inboxes, from trends and obligations, from algorithms that learn our attention and sell it back to us. You are allowed to renegotiate, not with thunder, with measure, with attention, with the small refusals that keep the soul unbruised, the meeting that can be an email, the scroll that can be a walk, the evening kept whole, the holiday honored without apology. If the worst in those Greek stories was the way harm dressed itself as holy, then the answer is modest and stubborn. Do not dress harm beautifully. Strip off the ribboned words and look at the face. If it asks for blood, say no. If it asks for your entire weekend, ask why. If it asks for your child's laughter in exchange for someone else's comfort, fold the bargain closed. Give instead what the myths secretly bless. Time to mend the net. Bread to a neighbor. A story that loosens fear's grip. A song that makes the room softer. Let the mind walk, now, to the sea. The same moon looks in your window that once silvered the Aegean. The same long muscle of water breathes in and out against shores you have never seen. In one direction, Athens rises as a silhouette of stone. In another, small coves shelter boats with names painted by hand. The sea keeps its old promises. Tide, swell, calm after wind, a light like spilled milk across a night surface. The Greeks watched this and learned patience. We can watch and learn the same. See the waves. They arrive. They receive light. They lean, break, and turn to lace. They slip away. Fear behaves like that when you do not fight it. Arrive, crest, curl thin, recede. So does longing. So does anger. So does grief. You do not command them to stop. You make room. You notice the pattern. Each feeling has a rhythm, and rhythm is survivable. Between one wave and the next, there is a pause, thin as silk, present as breath. Rest there. Let the next wave come as a visitor, not an owner. Let it go as a visitor, not a thief. Imagine the harbor at first light. Nets dry on posts. A boy runs the length of the quay and back, simply to feel his body answer morning. A woman checks a knot and nods, satisfied, the way a musician tunes a string and hears it fall into true. A fisherman, Nico or someone like him, sets a small basket aside without making a speech about generosity. The air smells of resin and bread. A gull draws a white line from sky to sea. All of this is ordinary. All of it is enough. The myths hover like distant islands, instructive and beautiful. The day is the boat between them. You can carry forward a handful of vows so light they don't disturb sleep. I will not name harm as holy. I will keep my fire moving. Knowledge, warmth, skill, without waiting for permission. I will practice curiosity with care, opening what I open like a craftsman, closing what I close without locking. I will honor order when it carries mercy. I will step aside when it doesn't. I will place hope within reach. Let those vows thin to breath. Let them become feeling rather than words. The room dims a little more. The edges soften. If thoughts come, let them pass like boats at twilight, each with a lamp, each leaving only a gentle wake. If a harder memory arrives, the cliff, the altar, the corridor, wrap it in the same fabric the theater used. Chorus, context, care. Place it on the shore. Watch the tide take some of its sharpness away. This is not forgetting, it is finishing. The sea outside the window of the mind is dark glass now. Somewhere, a rope rubs a wooden post and makes that tender tapping. Toke, talk, reassurance measured in oak and salt. The stars are not louder for being old. Their gift is steadiness. The myths are not truer for being ancient. Their gift is recognition. They recognized us then. They recognize us now. We are the ones who decide what to bless. Close your eyes. Feel the bed hold you, like a small bay holds a boat. No argument, just cradling. Shoulders heavy, hands warm, breath smooth. The world is wide, and tonight it has no demands. The mirror of story is turned face down on the table. The room is yours. If there is a God in this hour, it is kindness, unarmed, unhurried, impartial as moonlight on a sleeping sea, in and out. Waves come, waves go. Fear comes, fear goes. You remain like a coastline, shaped by time but patient and beautiful where it bends to meet the water. Rest there, on that quiet verge, and let the tide learn your name. Inhale, exhale, all is quiet. A slow wave lifts, travels, lays itself down in lace, and is gone. Another follows, unhurried, the same and not the same. Moonlight walks a silver path across the surface, step by step by step. Somewhere far away, a temple holds its breath. Lamps are steady, stone is cool. The night keeps watch. Inhale, exhale, all is quiet. Let your forehead smooth, like calm water inside a sheltered cove. Let your eyes rest heavy and kind behind their lids, as if shaded by an olive branch. Unhook the jaw. The tongue is a small boat, floating, untied. Shoulders soften, lowering like sails at dusk. Arms loose, hands warm. Palms open to the dark's gentle breeze. Belly easy, rising with each tide of breath, settling with each return. Hips steady as rock. Thighs, knees, calves, quiet shoreline. Heels and toes, small stones warmed by day, cooling under the moon. Inhale, exhale, all is quiet. Wave 1 arrives, bows, and leaves. Wave 2 arrives, bows, and leaves. Wave 3 arrives, bows and leaves. Wave 4, softer now. Wave 5, a whisper. Between waves, there's a pause. Rest there. Between thoughts, there's a pause. Rest there. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like oars dipping and lifting in perfect rhythm. Like a bell at the harbor. Talk, talk. Reassurance measured in wood and salt. Moonlight pours over marble steps and across your pillow. Laurel smoke thins and fades. The air is clear. The chorus has gone home. Their benches are cool to the touch. Only the softest sounds remain. A moth thinking of a lamp. A night breeze reading the leaves. The hush that follows a blessing. Inhale. Exhale. All is quiet. If a thought rises, let it drift past like a small boat with one light. Do not board. Watch it glide by, then turn your face again to the silver path. If a memory calls, answer it with kindness. Not now. Sleep first. Morning will listen. Count the waves again, but slower. 1. The mind becomes smooth. 2. The body becomes heavy. 3. The room becomes kind. 4. The world becomes simple. 5. You are held. Inhale. Exhale. All is quiet. The sea keeps breathing for you. The sky keeps the lamp. The ancient stones keep the silence. You keep only this, the gentlest of promises to yourself. Rest. Let the edges blur. Let the day set like a sun behind a hill you no longer need to climb. Let sleep enter as a friend arrives, without knocking, without hurry, already forgiven for being late. Inhale. Exhale. All is quiet. May your heartbeat match the moon's slow metronome. May your dreams take the easy road along the terraces. May the night carry you the way a calm wave carries a leaf. And now, the blessing, soft as a hand over a candle. May your dreams be as calm as the stars over the Aegean Sea. Inhale. Exhale. All is quiet. Waves come. Waves go. Moonlight in. Moonlight out. Temple silence. Harbor bell. Sleep.